My name is Alice Kratzer. I am a wasp scientist and author and illustrator of the new book, The Social Wasps of North America, which you can learn more about in the description. So, over the course of writing this book, I had to draw and paint over 900 illustrations of wasps. So, I thought I'd take some time today to go over my process and teach you how to paint a wasp. Let's get right into it. Okay, so just as a quick caveat, I'm going to be showing my method. It's not necessarily the best method, it's just what has worked for me in the process of my work. So that being said, my program of choice is Clip Studio Paint, which is shown here. Um, and what I'm going to do is get a new page set up. I like to do about 3000 by 3000 in width and length, just because you need to make sure that you have enough resolution so that if you end up doing something commercial with it, the pictures actually come out good. So once we have that, what I like to do is draw with pencil and paper first to get a rough idea of what I want the eventual painting to look like, and then I'll just scan that into my computer using my phone. So I can import the sketch here. Okay, so now you can see that I've imported the sketch onto this page. Um, so it wasn't quite perfect. I wasn't quite happy with it. So I did a few edits beforehand just to make sure that it was as good as possible. I'm going to resize this here and try to center it as best I can. Might need to change that afterwards. Um, and then I can get rid of the base layer because we want this to be transparent. Okay, and I'm going to name this first layer here lines. It's going to be the main line work layer. And what I'm going to do, which is very useful for insects especially because they have bilateral symmetry, I will create a symmetric ruler. So down here on the bottom left, there's a ruler icon, and I can click on that. You can scroll down and get to symmetric ruler. So I'm going to put my cursor at the top of the screen, right about in the middle, and drag it down to the bottom of the screen. And I'm also going to hold Shift, and that locks it into a vertical position here. So let that go, and there we have it. You might be able to see the purple line in the middle of that screen. That is the symmetric ruler. So what that does is anything that we paint on one side will end up being painted on the other. And you can see how this can be very useful with insect paintings especially. Okay, so now that we have that layer with the ruler, I'm going to right click on the ruler icon over on the layer, and I'm going to select show in all layers. So now if we create another layer here, you'll see that it also is symmetric. Now the reason I have the symmetric ruler on the line work layer is because I keep my lines throughout the entirety of my painting process. So the lines I have at the beginning are the same as the lines that I have at the end. And that's important because I've run into a lot of errors where I accidentally deselect the ruler and then things aren't symmetric and I have to redo a whole bunch of stuff, which is just a pain. So I definitely recommend keeping the ruler on the layer that you're going to keep throughout your painting process. Okay, so for line work, I found unusual among digital artists. I'm sort of an odd one out here, but I like to use the curve tool to make my lines. I typically try to keep it fairly small, around 4 size, and black, just for the sake of consistency. So what I like to do is, using the base layer as a guide, I will trace over the where I want the outline of the wasp to be. And you can see here I'm just clicking and dragging to place the end of the line, and then I'm just moving my cursor around to make it a curve. And for me at least, this I like the result of it because it makes the line work look very smooth and professional, and I don't have to worry about like using a pencil tool or anything where I'm not steady. I'm not steady-handed. So this really works better for me. Also, unique among digital artists, or maybe not unique, but very unusual. I use a mouse um, to do my line work, and also all of the painting. So, uh, because of that, because of my limitations in terms of skills with different technologies, I prefer to stick to tools that I can use regardless of what I'm working on. I can use a mouse. I can use a trackpad to do this. Um, so this is a very good system, I guess, method for if you don't have like a fancy digital drawing tablet or anything like that. So I'm going to outline the rest of this wasp, and I will restart the video once that's finished. Okay, so I have outlined the wasp here. You can see I took a lot of liberties. I usually have a couple of reference photos open on my computer of, you know, the actual wasps to make sure that what I'm drawing actually is representative of reality and not just representative of my first draft drawing. So you can see here, I resized the sketch page to make sure everything would fit, and I've finished the outline of the sketch of the wasp. So now I can get rid of the sketch here, and you can see it's only the line work. So the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in the wings, which is exactly the same process as the body, except I do it on a different layer, just to make sure that I can color in the wasp underneath the wings without any difficulties. That's one of the great things about digital work, is that you can layer things. So I'm definitely going to take advantage of that. All right, and just like that, the wing layers are done as well. So as you can see here, I actually copied the sketch here and reoriented it to help me with my work, and did the wings the same way as I did the lines. So now I don't need the sketch anymore, so I'm going to deselect that, and we're left with just the wasp. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to color in the body with a base color. So normally I just use black for this, so I'm going to make a new layer here, just call it black, and I'm going to select everything outside of the lines of the body, and that includes those little spaces right in here between the legs. And then I'm going to use this handy dandy tool up at the top, which is invert selected area. So this way I am selecting everything that's inside of the body. And I'm just going to use the fill tool to color that whole area black. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder for detail work. Whoops. Hang on. And while I'm at it, I will also create a folder for the wings. I just like to keep them separate. So in the detail folder, I'm going to create a new layer, and this is going to be the light highlights. So I like to do the light highlights with just pure white and normal layer blending. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the line layer, and I'm going to select whichever parts I want the highlight to be in, and then I'm going to use the airbrush tool with soft to go through the first pass of that. So it's usually something like this, something here, a bit on the scutum and the scutellum. Just making sure that the parts that are raised have a little bit of highlight, and that really makes it pop. And then, of course, it's very important to make sure that the eyes are highlighted as well. So what I like to do here is zoom in, use this tool, do this right here. And I just think that gives it a lot of personality. And then I'll also do the head, just like this. And we're already well on our way. So I'm gonna clean this up and we'll see how it turns out. All right, so now we have the light highlights added in. Next step for me is to do the dark highlights. So I'm going to create another layer here in the details. And with the dark highlights, I tend to what I do depends on how saturated the wasp itself is. If the wasp is very saturated, I like to use a dark red for the dark highlights and apply them the same way as the light highlights with the soft brush around the edges. But if it's desaturated, then I like to use just a black for the same thing. And if I'm going to use the dark red, I like to change the blending from normal to multiply, which just affects the actual color of other layers that are below the dark highlights. So that's useful for if the wasp is, say, a yellow color. So I'm going to do that here because I expect that the final wasp will in fact be yellow. Okay, so it's a little bit hard to see, but I have added the highlights in. Here, I'll get rid of the black for a second. So the black is really most important where there's a lot of curvature in the insect. So I put it around the sides, around the edges of the head, around the edge of the abdomen, and right in next to the body here. So that will really give depth to the drawing, so that's why it's important. All right, so the next step here is the color, which is one of my favorites. It's just very satisfying to fill in an insect with all sorts of patterning and colors. Okay, so I've opened up this reference photo from a specimen at the Cornell University Insect Collection of the wasp that I'm going to paint. So I'm going to be referencing this back and forth as I create. Oh god, what did I do? So I'm going to be referencing this photo as I do the painting, so let's get right into it. So I'm going to use the same tool I did for the line art to do a lot of the coloring, at least in the first pass. It's helpful for me to just block out the colors as I go through them. And this is a very iterative process. I'm going to just go back and forth between the reference and the painting and just keep working until it looks about right. So what I'm doing here is I'm using the paint tool and the eraser tools here just to get the right shape. And right now I'm just working on this bit right here. And let's see, that's close but not quite right. Also, I just realized that I'm painting in the lines layer, which is a big no-no, so I'm going to undo all of that. It's been a while since I actually painted a wasp, but that's something that I never quite figured out how to avoid permanently. It's just something that you're going to have to check often to make sure you're in the right layer. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I made throughout the process, the mistake that I keep making, despite the fact that I've been doing this for years. Okay, so I got that about right. For the For this part down here, the next part down, it looks like there's a bit of a gradient going this way, with sort of a this shape down at the bottom. So I'm going to create that in this painting. Okay, make sure I'm in the right layer. To keep me in the lines, I usually just select the, I guess you'd call it a cell, that's from the line layer, and then switch back over to the color layer to work on that. So we've got this shape here. Just make sure that's correct. That's about right. Make this a little bit more of a curve. Okay. And just going to fill that in. So now we've got that part of it. And then it looks like all of the other segments are yellow, which you can't really see on that photo, but I just know from having worked with the species for a while that part will be yellow. Okay, so now we got the first part of that down, the solid colors. Now I'm going to go back through and work on the darker gradients. So I usually end up with like 3 or 4 different color layers, just depending on the complexity of the particular painting. So here we have this. What color is this? This is a bit of a orange. And sorry if I'm just sort of rambling, talking to myself. It's part of the process. Okay, so I think that this part down here should be a little bit lighter, so I'm just going to select that whole bit, select the layer, go up to Edit, Tonal Correction, Hue Saturation, and I'm just going to make that a little bit more yellowy, right about there. Maybe even a little bit more than that. So to do that, I'm just going to select these parts that I've already done, and I'm going to change my color palette and use the airbrush to make it more yellow. Okay, now that's pretty good. For the base, I'm happy with that. To move on to the next part. The other part of this is going to be very similar to what you just saw, so I'm going to skip ahead again until I finished this next part of the thorax and the head. Okay, I have now finished the painting. As you can see, I used the same techniques throughout the whole thing, as I showed before. I did a little bit of editing down here to make sure that everything looked okay. So if we can see this, so this is the first layer, this is the second layer, and this is the third layer, and each one of them just adds a little bit of different color. I like to keep those separate. I think it adds a nice effect. Okay, so now that all of that's done, the only 2 things we have left are the hairs, the setae, on the body and the wings. I think this time around I'm going to start with the wings. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with the body when I was creating the black background. I'm going to select the wing line layer, select everything outside of the wings, and then invert the selected area. So I'm just selected the area inside the wings. I'm going to add a new layer here for wing color. And as before, there's probably going to be a whole bunch of those in this layer. So let's see, the wings here are sort of hyaline, which means not a whole lot of color, but in order to make this painting look good, I'm going to add a little bit of color, probably right about in here. Let's do right about there. And I'm just going to use the airbrush tool again and just gently go over the wings like this, making them a little bit darker towards the body. And that'll be our base color layer. And I'm going to make a second layer here above that. And so, as you can see on the specimen, there's areas of the wing that are a lot darker. So I'm going to mimic that in here. I'm also going to make the main veins of the wing a bit darker as well. So I'm going to do that with the, let's see, this is sort of a dark red. I can do that. Okay. I'm going to select this as well. And I'm just going to use the airbrush again and just go over this area, make sure that it's representative of the specimen. And let's see here. It looks like it extends a little bit further than that, so I can make that adjustment. Like this. And then it doesn't look quite dark enough, so I'm just going to go ahead and cheat and just make the whole layer darker. I guess it's not really cheating, but there we go. That's pretty close. And I'm also going to make the bottom layer a little bit less saturated to match the colors that we saw in the specimen. Right about like that. Okay. And then the last bit of the wing is to add the highlights. I like to make the highlights in the wings really pop as much as I can. So I'm going to do it in the cells that are most likely to reflect things, and you can't really see this here. You can see it a little bit down at the bottom where the wings are reflecting. I have painted enough wasps to know what tends to look good and what tends to be realistic in terms of what you would actually see on a specimen. So what I'm going to do is make sure I'm on the right layer, and then I'm going to highlight this cell. And then because there's a little bit of topology on the wings, it's not entirely flat, and it goes sort of like this. I'm going to make it so that the back edge here is not reflecting as much as the front edge. So I'm just going to remove that back edge with the selection tool. So I'm just going to select that area, and I'm going to delete it, just like that. And then I'm going to do that a couple of times, just to make sure it looks nice. There we go. And then I'm going to do the next area. So let's say these cells. Just make sure that they're nice and highlighted. And I'm going to use the same tools from before and select and get rid of that. Okay, and that gives a little bit more depth. I'm also going to use the eraser set down to a density of 0, or sorry, 1, and that gives a nice smooth gradient to work with. I'm just sort of removing highlight from the places that I don't want it. So I'm going to finish this up, see what looks best, and then I will get back to you when I'm done. Okay, so now the wing highlights are done. I ended up not going with the wing effect that I was talking about before right here. It really depends on the wasp, whether it looks good or not. I decided to go against it for this particular drawing, which means the only thing we have left are the setae, the hairs, on the insect. So what I'm going to do for that is create a new layer in details, specifically for setae. And I'm going to select the line tool, the curve, and I'm going to go down to the bottom and check the ending condition here. And what that does is it makes it the line get thinner towards the end. So as you can see, when I make these, the ends get thinner, and I'm going to use that to manually place every hair on this insect. This is what the process looks like. And for your sake, I'm going to skip ahead until I'm done. Okay, and the hairs are finally done, so this is what the final painting looks like. As you can see, I ended up going with a slightly lighter shade for the hairs. So, what do you think? How did I do? I think this turned out pretty good. And just for making it through the video, here's a sneak peek at the final page for Paratartargus smithii from my new book. All right, so I had a lot of fun with that. I hope you did too. I hope you go forth and paint insects to your heart's content. Um, uh, as before, information about my new book is down in the description, and I hope you have a great day. Stay safe.